Welcome to Business World. I'm your host Siddharth, and today we are talking to Mr. Rajesh Menon, Director General, Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, let's start this conversation with COVID-19. How has the COVID-19 impacted the auto industry in India?
You see, the auto industry was going through a phase of degrowth since last year itself, 1920. And we were all hoping that post-April, once the transition to BS6 happens towards the first quarter of next financial year, that's the current financial year, we will start seeing some better signs of auto industry. But COVID has made it more difficult. It has resulted in a scenario where we are now looking at another year of degrowth. So we are looking at 2 consecutive years of degrowth if I look at last year and look at the current year, which we are going through. So it has resulted in major challenges for the industry. Of course, there are some opportunities also, but there are major challenges for the industry going ahead.
Sir, you're speaking about challenges. What kind of challenges do you foresee? Are we seeing a labor shortage? Are we seeing a downward trend in the consumer sentiment? What kind of challenges are we facing?
See, the first and foremost challenge we faced was a lockdown. And because of the lockdown, factories had to be shut. So that resulted in complete break in supply chains. There was no production at all. Never happened in the past that you had 1 month absolutely zero production. So, but we are off that phase. We are now moved ahead. Production has now started in almost all the companies. Supply chains are slowly coming back to normal. There are still challenges in supply chain. So, if you ask me the current challenges, one is supply chain. Supply chain in the sense there are still problems of movement. For example, Chennai has declared a lockdown once again, and Chennai is a major hub for suppliers to all our OEMs. So there are small challenges supply chain even now which we are facing. We are having issue of labor. There is a issue which we are facing on the labor front with so much of migrant labor moving back to their locations. So these are challenges on the supply front. But what is worrying quite a bit is the challenge of demand front. Where will the demand come from? And we have done our own estimates as SIAM on what could be the outlook for FY21. And the outlook is that we are looking at a major degrowth across all segments once again, which is in a scenario of a negative overall growth of Indian economy of GDP, which is what all indications are saying, that there will be an overall negative growth of the Indian GDP. In that scenario, we're looking at a major degrowth across segments once again. So demand is a big challenge, big issue of concern, and it's bothering everybody in the industry as of now.
So do you see a downward trend in shared mobility and consumers taking up personal vehicles? Could be in budget segments, could be a downward, somebody who's buying a 17 lakh rupee car could go down to 12 lakh rupee car. Do we see a downward demand, or do we see people just not going and buying cars?
See, it's difficult to articulate saying that this is what is going to happen going forward. But the initial indications are, as a trend, that there is a preference for personal mobility across the value chain. So when I say personal mobility, obviously two-wheelers is a preferred option. Small cars is a preferred option. So these are 2 segments where we are seeing preferences clearly for personal mobility. Whether this will be a sustainable trend, whether this will carry on for some more time, we'll have to wait and watch. But yes, the immediate trends are that there is some preference for personal mobility options, especially for two-wheelers and for small cars. I must also mention that one more segment which is seeing a reasonably good pickup in terms of is small commercial vehicles. Small commercial vehicles primarily because of e-commerce firms moving goods around. So there is a bit of a demand which has come up, uptake which has come up on the area of SCVs.
Sir, I mean, the auto industry had been continuously making investments, whether it's for product development, whether it's for BS6 emission norms, whether it's for safety norms. Could you share the figures of what the industry spent last year? And as per your projections, will it be less than this year? And if yes, can you cite reasons? Is coronavirus the only reason for that?
See, investments will continue. What is happening is that the entire transition from BS4 to BS6, the industry on an overall basis invested up to 60,000 crore Indian rupees. So significant investment for the transition to BS6. We are now going to see one more transition coming up, which is RDE. that's real driving emissions, which will come in a couple of years from now. So industry will invest in making that move to RDE. There's also a CAFE, fuel efficiency norms for passenger vehicles coming up. So vis-a-vis both fuel efficiency for CAFE and also for RDE, the emission norms, there will be investment for industry. But capital investment, capex investment will get affected. How much, to what extent, we'll have to wait and see. But definitely this year, ability to invest in these will get impacted because of COVID.
Sir, how has the industry been able to reinvent itself? If you can give the macro perspective of the industry.
See, from a short-term perspective, what is happening is industry. There is a lot of things that have changed in the shop floor. Safety, hygiene, precaution. So those are immediate impact which has happened on the shop floor. The things have changed. And the social distancing norms, different types of ways they have managed to screening. So on the shop floor, many things have changed. Will that be a sustainable practice? It all depends on how COVID-19, how that shapes up in the next few months. So that's change on the shop floor front. One more thing in the short term is cash. I think you'll see a lot of focus on cash. How do we preserve cash? How do we become much more financially prudent in what we do in terms of expenditure? So that's another short-term measure which we will see. Many companies are doing it in a more medium-term and long-term also. So there are movement towards that. But there also be an effort to redefine our relationship as OEMs with the suppliers and with the dealers on both sides of the value chain. I think you will see in the months ahead there will be a redefinition of how we engage both dealers and suppliers as OEMs. And so that the value chain becomes much more efficient and much more smoother going forward.
Sir, scrappage policy. OEMs have been talking about scrappage policy, and government has also shown some interest. Do you think scrappage policy is the real thing that the industry needs to generate the demand? And how do you think the consumers will take it? What kind of incentive should be given to the consumers?
See, scrappage policy, we just started discussing with the government Minister of Road Transport many years back. That point of time, the discussion and the focus was on its benefits vis-a-vis environment and vis-a-vis climate change, which are very clear and which are very evident. When you start taking more polluting vehicles off the road, especially in the context of BS6 now, when you have such a clean vehicle like a BS6 from a both petrol as well as diesel perspective on the road, it will be prudent to also have cleaner vehicles alongside. So from an environment and climate change perspective, the benefits are very clear. But now what we have been saying is that scrappage will also help in creating demand. So now there are two benefits, not just an environment, but also demand. And scrappage policy, whatever we understood from what has happened in Europe, is that scrappage policy will be successful in its response to consumers if you are able to create incentives. You have to create incentives. You have to incentivize the consumer to sell his old vehicle and buy his new vehicle. So we have been, as SIAM, engaging with the government, requesting for an incentive-based scrappage policy, where we can look at incentives in the form of rebates in GST, road tax, and registration tax. And there's also been discussion on what could be possible OEM discounts. So we'll have to look at an incentive-based policy which will encourage the customer to sell his old vehicle and buy a new vehicle. So there are clear benefits of environment and also of course of demand.
Announced this Atmanirbhar policy, under which tranche of packages were given to various sectors of the industry. So what are the takeaways of the recently announced policy? Has it been adequately? Has the auto industry been adequately addressed? If yes, can you shed some light on that? What all has been taken care of?
See, Atmanirbhar announcements which were made with the Honorable Finance Minister definitely had lots for the agri and rural sector, and also for the SME sector. So in that sense, it did have benefits. So rural economy picks up, you will see demand for two-wheelers, which we already started seeing. So you will see an uptake for two-wheelers. So there are clear benefits for from the rural sector side and also for SMEs. SMEs, we are seeing many of our component suppliers are now included in the definition of MSME as per the new announcement, which will definitely benefit the component side. We have made a request as SIAM that if dealers can also be included in the MSME Act provisions, that will make sure they also get those benefits. But suppliers are definitely getting those benefits as components. So many of them are now eligible to those benefits as part of the MSME Act. But what we have been saying is that we need a stimulus package to create demand, which was not there in those announcements. And we are continuing to engage, continue to dialogue with the government, and we are hopeful that there will be a sector-specific package where some of our suggestions could be considered to create and stimulate demand.
And sir, is it safe to assume that volumes are expected more in the rural side as the government is focusing on rural infrastructure? Also, as the number of COVID hotspots are less in rural and semi-urban markets, do we see numbers picking up more over there rather than in a tier 1 city?
See, it's difficult. It's difficult to put that into one particular trend. Broadly, what we say is that if there is a increase in rural, if there is a revival in the rural economy, if the rural economy gets strengthened, you typically see a demand for two-wheelers. So that's a clear correlation which we have always been seeing, and it is very evident now that there is a pickup for two-wheelers because of a good demand in the rural sector. Similarly, what we say is if the infrastructure sector picks up, construction activity picks up, there will be a correlation to a demand for commercial vehicles. So we are very hopeful that the set of announcements made by the Honorable Finance Minister in terms of the National Infrastructure Program, if that gets executed, you will start seeing some demand for the commercial vehicle side. Similarly, there is a huge correlation of consumer sentiment with PVs. So if the consumer sentiment picks up with some good set of announcements, there will be a uptake for passenger vehicles, and that's why we are saying one of the things could be to handle the taxation side, which will make it affordable and probably will help in increasing the consumer sentiment so that they can buy those cars, buy those passenger vehicles. So it is very difficult to say one single trend for all segments. There are segment-specific trends, segment-specific correlations which we have seen from the past many years.
So now coming to electric vehicles, what kind of trend do you foresee? The current situation is where OEMs are running short on cash, they are conserving cash, therefore the R&D and everything else on electric vehicles could go down. OEM's focus could be on getting numbers. And coming to consumers are postponing their big ticket purchases. So where do you think the electric vehicle industry would go in the coming days?
See, electric vehicles typically has got three challenges. One is what we call from the price side. There is a challenge. What we would normally say is there is a price anxiety. That is one aspect of it. Second is the range anxiety. If you take a battery, to what extent that will carry on a single charge. So there's a range anxiety. And third is the charging anxiety. Where is the charging infrastructure? So those three elements of price anxiety, range anxiety, and charging anxiety continues to be the same issues which we had even pre-COVID. So those would have to be addressed to create that market to make sure there's a reasonably large uptake. In the meanwhile, companies will of course keep working on R&D. There are lots of work happening on the battery side. So R&D investments, R&D efforts will continue to happen. There are companies looking at localizing the supply chain. So those efforts and those discussions will carry on. But those three challenges which I said about price, range, and charging infrastructure, I think those has to be addressed from a policy angle to make it more affordable and to increase the market penetration for EVs.
So you spoke about localization. Now there is a Make in India movement by the government, and then there is a boycott China movement which is trending right now. So not many manufacturers import their products from China, but there are Chinese manufacturers in India, and also components and smaller items are imported from China. Sir, what is your take on this? See,
there is from a import dependence perspective, there are imports happening in China, across different segments. industry. See, the only thing I can say is that there is already a discussion and initiative and effort on behalf of Indian OEMs to localize the supply chains. I think that discussions will carry on. How much we can localize, to what extent, that discussions will carry on, that effort will carry on. But on the short term, import will continue to some extent because that will affect the entire value chain if not. But on the EV side specifically, there is a phased manufacturing program under the FAME 2 scheme. Under the phased manufacturing program, there is an effort with proper timelines of localization, so where industry is partnering very actively to ensure that the localization happens over a period of time. So those efforts and those initiatives will carry on.
So how much does the auto industry currently contribute to the country's GDP? And going forward, do you expect the contribution to go up? And also, how many people are directly and indirectly employed in this sector? And has the employee count reduced because of COVID and other factors because of recession? If you can give the numbers with us, or you expect the numbers to go up going forward?
So from an overall contribution to the Indian economy, auto sector is contributing to roughly about 7% of India's overall GDP as per the old series, and 6.4% as per the new series. And also nearly 49% of the manufacturing GDP as per the old series, and 35% as per the new series is contributed by the automobile sector. In terms of employment, we are supporting roughly 37 million jobs, both directly and indirectly across the value chain. So that is the contribution of the auto sector, which is significant in every aspect vis-a-vis in the context of the whole economy.
As Siddharth just mentioned about the issues that global companies are having with China. So do we see export opportunities going up from India? Do we see wider exports from India? Because China is one of the major global auto manufacturing hubs in Asia, and India is also one of the major small car hubs.
No, it's difficult to put a percentage in that sense, but exports is definitely an area where we'll see more focus from Indian automobile OEMs. There are many markets which have not been tapped. So, of course, there's a lot of focus on the South Asia market, but there are many other markets which have not yet been tapped. So, there will be a lot of focus on new markets. There will be focus on increasing market penetration in some of the existing markets. So, exports is something you will see a lot of focus in the coming months. And I think as SIAM, we will continue to play that role of facilitating that entire scale-up of a possible increase of penetration in the export markets.
Have there been any talks with the government to bring down GST? Because right now it's quite high. I have been speaking to multiple car manufacturers, and most of them have said that it's prohibitively expensive, especially the small cars and all, to do away with some kind of cess on high-end vehicles or so. If you can talk a little bit of that.
No, we have made a request as part of our demand generation recommendations. We have said we need to look at bringing GST down to 18% from 28%. See, automobile is one of the most highly taxed manufactured product. We are looking at a 28% GST, and there is also a cess, and that composition cess varies from 1% to 28% depending on the category of vehicle. So that means at the higher end, from 1% to 22%, composition cess. So at the higher end, you're looking at a tax which will vary from 28 plus 1, that is 29%, to 28 plus 22, which is 50%. And if you add road tax to it, which varies across state, if you add road tax to it, you can realize what is a tax component for an automobile industry. So it's definitely one of the highest taxed manufactured product. One of our recommendations has been to bring down GST from 28 to 18%. Discussions and dialogue are continuing. We are very hopeful at some stage they will be able to find a way to address this. But taxation continues to be a major element of affordability. See, from a vehicle affordability, if you ask me, across segments, not just PVs but two-wheelers and also commercial vehicles. Vehicle affordability is impacted by two elements. One element is tax, and the other element is regulations. Series of regulations results in cost increases which again makes the product unaffordable. So we'll have to address the issue of taxation and regulations carefully so that affordability doesn't get impacted over a period of time.
So what, according to you, would be the industry's focus in a post-COVID world?
See, industry will continue. As I said, there are two things. One is there will be lots of focus internally within the organization. How can we become more prudent in terms of finances, in terms of operations, in terms of managing costs? So that focus is becoming more and more stronger. So that is internally. Externally, there will be a further strengthening or redefining relationships and equations with dealers and suppliers. I think you will see those movements going forward. For example, there will be digitalization of sales in some aspect. How will that get addressed? So the relationship between dealers and suppliers will also go through a bit of a change going forward.